RusAme reader, Kurosong. And today I will be reading to you from Never Left by Plastic Bag 3207. Now, on to Chapter 15. Russia sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with his hands. Germany was hugging Poland, trying to keep him calm after almost being shot. Greenland and Antarctica were quietly talking to each other. It was hard to know that not only had their dog just been shot, but they had almost witnessed an assassination. The 5 countries looked up as a veterinarian walked through the door into the lobby. "Which one of you is the owner of Chips?" he asked. Antarctica raised his hand. "We are, sir," he said. "But please, whatever you have to tell us, tell Russia first," he said. The man looked a little surprised. "Well, okay, Mr. Russia, if you could follow me, please," the vet said. Russia stood up and followed. They walked through the door and down a little hallway, turning into an open door on the left. There, laying on a table, was a white dog, with his eyes closed and his back left leg in a cast. Russia wanted to lunge forward and give some much-needed attention to the dog, but he knew that he couldn't at the moment. "He'll live, luckily. The bullet only just nicked his femur. It should take about 6 weeks to heal fully," the man explained. Russia nodded, not taking his eyes off the dog. Russia carried the white dog into his house and set him on the couch. Because the whole thing had taken a while, Antarctica and Greenland had just decided to stay the night. Russia, of course, offered to take care of Chips, which they, of course, allowed. Germany and Poland offered to give the couple a place to stay. The tall man took a seat next to the dog, gently scratching behind the dog's ear. He smiled softly as he and Chips stared into each other's eyes. He was going to be sad when Antarctica and Greenland had to go back home, but for now he could just enjoy the time he had with his counterpart. Russia reached for the remote and turned on the TV. He smiled as a show that he and America used to watch was on. Chips seemed to take interest, wagging his tail whenever a funny part played. Sometimes Russia wondered about the dog. He did act like a human sometimes. Perhaps he was just a little odd. Yeah, just a little odd. He smiled sadly as one of America's favorite episodes started to play. Russia reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box. The small box that had protected the 2 rings that was supposed to tie the knot between him and his beloved America. His attention was soon interrupted by Chips licking his hand. He smiled and stroked the dog. "You're a good dog, Chips," the man said. The dog wagged his tail slightly. Russia sighed and looked at the TV, allowing Chips to rest his head on the man's leg and fall asleep. After about an hour, Russia noticed that he was starting to doze off. He turned the TV off and picked up the dog, carrying him to his room. He gently set Chips at the foot of his bed before changing into something more comfortable and crawling under the covers. Russia gave one last look to the sleeping dog before turning off the lamp and falling asleep. Russia sighed as he scratched behind the dog's ear. It was now the 2nd time he was saying goodbye to the dog. "You'll be a good boy," he said before moving out of the way. Then Poland and Germany walked up. There were tears threatening to fall down both their faces. Poland hugged the dog. This dog had just saved his life, and now he had to say goodbye. Life isn't fair. After letting his husband drown the dog in hugs and kisses, Germany stepped forward. He couldn't help it and started to cry. The man was too embarrassed to actually say anything, but if it was just them, he would have had a lot more to say. He smiled as he felt Chips licking his cheek. "Good boy," he whispered. After everyone had said their goodbyes, Antarctica and Greenland drove off. The drive was long, and America wasn't tired enough to sleep. So instead, he just watched the world go by as they drove away from civilization and into the countryside. Finally, after a few hours, Greenland pulled into their driveway. He opened the car door and helped the dog out, setting him safely on the ground. "Come here, Chips," Antarctica said, already standing at the door. Yes, the two knew that the dog needed rest, but they also knew that he couldn't just sit around all day. Greenland stood behind Chips, ready to catch him or carry him if need be. It was a slow process, but eventually Chips reached the door. Antarctica smiled. "Good boy, Chips," he said. The dog yawned and walked over to his dog bed and plopped down. He curled up into a little ball and just stared off into space. Something was off. This wasn't like with UN's assistant or anything like that. It just didn't feel right. After a few moments of thinking, it hit America. Russia. He needed Russia. And whether the man knew it or not, he needed him. He shakily stood up and walked to the front door. He just sat there, staring out and down the road, and waited until he was sure Antarctica and Greenland were asleep. The house was silent. America stood and thought about how he was going to get out. Then he remembered that Greenland and Antarctica didn't lock the doors because they were out in the middle of nowhere. There was no fear of robbery. America did his best to pull the door open. After a few attempts, he succeeded. Then he quickly pushed at the screen door. "Russia, here I come," he told himself as he started to limp down the road. He found that just walking was a little slow going, so he tried trotting. It was definitely faster, but he got tired quickly. He knew he couldn't run. There was just no way that was happening. He decided to go with the trotting. It felt like the road was never ending, just an infinite line forwards in the darkness. It was a little haunting to America. Sometimes he wondered if he was still going the right way. Then he saw a speed limit sign. He started to wag his tail. If he was in a car, that would mean only 1 hour left, so he trudged onward. Finally, he had reached the city. America had lived here for a long time, so he knew how to get around. He looked around at the buildings, getting his bearings before he continued to his and Russia's house. He looked around as he walked through the city. America had never really appreciated how beautiful it looked at night. It was nice. By the time he reached Russia's house, he was far too exhausted to try and wake Russia up to let him in. So he just plopped down right in front of the door and fell asleep. And that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed. Anyway, I'd like to invite you to join the Discord, which is linked down in the description below. That being said, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, night, or whatever it is for you. Just enjoy your time. And I will see you tomorrow.